Welcome back, Sharon.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. And I love your topic. I think this is going to be really important for people. So let's dive into it. What would you say are some signs that someone has a codependent or might have a codependent relationship with their adult child?
Yeah, so I'm going to start us out with just maybe a couple of reminders. At least from my perspective, people may have differing ones, but I really think about codependency as a spectrum, or like there's a continuum. So it's not an all or nothing situation. So as we talk about this, people can think about, what part of this applies to me, or to what extent does this apply to me? Because there's definitely aspects of what we're going to talk about that are completely normal, and we're going to, sort of span across to the part where we can get to a place where it is quite obviously no longer healthy. But there's a lot of middle ground. There's a lot of gray area. I think we can try to tease some of that out, or at least I hope that people will come away from this with maybe some questions that they can ask themselves, some things that they can keep in mind, so that they can continue to sort of interrogate themselves and be curious about what they're doing and why they're doing it, so that ultimately people can come to their own conclusion about, like, is this working for me and my family? Because it's, everybody's different. And then the other thing that I just want to preface this by saying is we're going to be talking about relationships with adult children. So, kids who have gotten to 18 or older. Of course, I think if people are listening and they have kids who are, a little bit younger than that, some of this will apply, or some of it may be really helpful to think about sort of as you anticipate, your child reaching adulthood, and how you can really prepare yourself and your child to avoid some of these pitfalls. So anyway, back to your original question, though. So we're going to talk specifically, we'll spend a bunch of time talking about enabling today, which is one element of it. And I'm going to sort of put a pin in that so we can come back to that in more detail. But I think the other way that you might think about what might be codependent is kind of an over-involvement in your adult child's life. And as we think about as children develop and move into adulthood, there should be a natural separation process, right? Our goal is that we want them to become more and more able to do things on their own, sort of the practical life skills, but we also want them to be emotionally able to take care of themselves as well. And so part of that is thinking about when you have small children, everything that they're doing, everything that's happening in their lives, their friends and all of those kinds of things, what, grades they're getting in school, and that's all appropriate. But again, as children get older, we need to really, make that space there and say, like, we don't need to know everything that's happening in our adult children's lives. We might be curious and want to know, but, that's that difference, is I no longer need to know, or it's not my place to necessarily know all of the details, right? They have a greater, need for privacy. And the other thing is, you might sort of think about how you're thinking about your child, emotionally, like sort of the sense of, oftentimes people who struggle with codependency will feel like they are responsible for somebody else. And again, not just, from the practical, point, from, financially or something like that, which again, like as we're talking about adult children, you're no longer, legally responsible, for your child's well-being. That doesn't mean that, as parents, we shouldn't, take on some of that and help, support our children in practical ways. But we need to remember that we're not responsible for somebody else's happiness. And so this is one of those codependent pitfalls that parents can fall into, is, wanting to make sure that everything is just right for their children. And again, there's a natural inclination, of course, that you do, you want to protect your children. You don't want them to suffer. But on the other hand, we have to be realistic about things and realizing, like, that we cannot, protect our children from all of the pain and suffering of the world, right? We do what we can to, try to buffer that somewhat. But again, especially as they, get out into the world on their own more and more, we have to accept that they need to be responsible for figuring things out. They need to be responsible for, creating their own happiness in the world. And that's not something that we can do. I mean, it's literally like, as much as we want to, and this goes for anybody, not just children, right? It's, we cannot make other people happy. We can't force them to do things that we think would be good for them, that would make them happier, more successful, or things would be easier for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a huge one for anyone watching who, whether you have an adult child or a younger child, absolutely that want to, right. It's that controlling kind of tendencies that we have of, I can do this. I can control everyone's happiness and make sure everything's just so in their life. So yeah.
It doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. I think often it truly is the desire, to, create something good for your child. But I think, when we overdo it, and again, especially, when we're talking about adult children, they don't necessarily want us to be, sort of in that controlling place of telling them what to do or how to do things, or what we think would make, life better for them, or how they will make more money, or, whatever it is that we think that they should be doing. They want to be able to figure that stuff out for themselves.
Yeah, right. And then it gives them more confidence to be able to obviously figure it out and become whoever they're, supposed to be, for sure. So
yeah. And then I think maybe one other piece that might be a sign would be, for some people, it might be like if you feel like you're kind of walking on eggshells around your child, like you're really maybe afraid to say no to them, or afraid that they're going to have a bad reaction to something that you say or do, or just your presence might be a sign, right? That again, that there's sort of this over involvement that you are now having to sort of arrange your life and make certain choices to prevent them from being unhappy or upset. So sort of the flip side of, that wanting to make them happy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's thinking, right, I can adjust what I'm doing and that will prevent them from being upset.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about enabling, what exactly is enabling for people who don't understand that, and where's the line, right? Where's that fine balance between helping and enabling?
Yes, that's a great question. Not always an easy one, like I was saying, to come to figure out. But I usually define enabling as doing something for somebody that they are capable of doing for themselves. And now I think we need to tack on a little bit more to that, because again, if we think about just perfectly healthy relationships, your relationship with your spouse or your parents or a friend, anybody, of course, we do things to help other people out that they can actually do for themselves, right? And so that in and of itself isn't a bad thing, right? It's not unhealthy. It's not codependent for me to, make dinner for my adult child, even though my adult child could cook their own meal. Right? What we want to think about is both the frequency of what we're doing and the reason that we're doing it, and also what is the adult child doing for themselves. And so we can kind of look at each of those pieces. So one piece is simply just like, how often are you doing things, for your child that they could do for themselves? It's a completely different experience if it feels like this is a occasional thing versus every day I'm in here, washing their dishes because they haven't cleaned up after themselves. And the other part of that is thinking about, why am I doing it? Right. So is it because, my child is working 2 jobs and going to college, and they're really busy and working really hard? And, it feels like it makes sense for me to, do this, load of laundry for them, or these dishes for them, something like that. Right. Or is it, I'm afraid that if I don't do this, something bad is going to happen. Or I feel guilty about something. And that's what's sort of spurring on this. I feel like I should do something to them because, sometimes it's simply like sometimes we have just sort of a general sense of guilt about things that we did or didn't do for our kids as they were growing up. So you might think about, like if somebody went through a difficult divorce and they feel like, oh, my kids really suffered as a result of that. Or just, they know that their child, had a traumatic experience. There was something really difficult that happened as they were growing up. You may, sort of come into their early adulthood feeling just sort of across the board kind of guilty, like that they had a hard time and like a sense that like you didn't do everything you were supposed to do. And again, like there's a certain amount of, parent guilt that I think everybody holds some of that sense of, I didn't do everything I wish I could have, or I could, I didn't give them everything that I wish I could have. But here's where we need to think about, is it really helping them, by now doing a lot of things for them out of a sense of guilt? Is that actually, going to make their life easier in the long run? And, we can explore a bit more about that piece of it too, I think. But I already, mentioned this other piece, which is also considering what else is your child doing? So again, it feels like it's a very different experience. Like I was saying, if, you're helping your child out with some things that they could do for themselves, but they're working really hard on a lot of, things that feel productive and like they're healthy for them. Versus if you're washing the dishes and doing their laundry, but they're sitting in front of the TV playing video games, 12 hours a day, right? Then that feels like, ooh, I'm doing these things and there's really no reason why they couldn't be doing them other than, they're relaxing and enjoying. And that sort of reminds me, one other thing that often is a clue here is if you're starting to feel resentful, that's another sign that we often experience too, is this feeling of like, I'm doing more, to help my child than they're doing to help themselves, right? It generally feels okay if there's some balance there, it's like, if they're doing things to help themselves, then it makes sense for me to be helping them out as well. But, it's never going to work if I'm working harder, to sort of get somebody's life working well than they are, right? It's their life, right? They need to be the one who's putting in most of the effort to try to accomplish whatever it is that they want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love all that, and great examples of like you were saying, why are we doing what we're doing? Why am I doing this right now? Because it's going to help them. And I love that question versus some other reason, right? Guilt from the past or all of that kind of stuff. So, okay. So let's say people watching or listening right now are recognizing, okay, yeah, I can see that in myself and I can see that I am enabling my adult child. How do they stop enabling and yet maybe also support their child in becoming more self-sufficient and responsible for their own life?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing I think is really, well, I'll say before I get into my first one thing, my other first one thing is
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.